Hello. Okay. Hello? Hello? Okay. A word often used to describe addiction is the state of being hooked on something. And I think that it's an apt word to use because oftentimes trying to quickly pull away from an addiction can only end up cutting you deeper. Humanity has lived alongside addiction for hundreds and thousands of years. Up to 12,000 years ago, we have seen people who are buried with tobacco near them and people who have had cultivations which they smoke regularly, similarly to how people do nowadays. And similarly, dice and board games have been present in burial sites for millennia all around the globe. But you may think that companies nowadays would see these horrors of addiction and try to stay away from it. Instead, they use it like a playbook, trying to see how best they can co opt these addictive mechanisms to serve their users. Today, I will explore the two main forms of addiction present in day to day life. We have substance abuse, things like drugs and chemicals, and habitual addictions like gambling. And then I will see how video game and social media companies have co opted these mechanics so they can retain their user bases and increase their user bases. Now, often, when we talk about addiction, the first thing that we think about is substance abuse, chemicals like drugs. And generally, we can divide these drugs into two main categories. There are soft drugs, these are more organic and less harmful, things like alcohol, tobacco, or psilocybin, which is in shrooms, and things like hard drugs. These are chemically manufactured and are much more harmful to health, and these are the ones which are the most addictive. Soft drugs are pretty normalized in today's society. Alcohol is ubiquitous and is almost present in all gatherings as a sort of social lubricant. But the drug which takes away the most human lives every single year is tobacco. Tobacco, in the form of cigarettes or cigars or pipes, is what has the highest death toll due to the many things which are present within it. But the addictive chemical which causes that level of coming back to the drug again and again is nicotine. Nicotine has many different parts in it, which lead to this sort of addictive effect. But first, let's take a step back and a step inwards to see how our brains work. When we have thoughts and when we match different concepts to each other, there is a system in our brain which maps neurons in neural pathways. One neuron gets an action impulse, which is an electrical impulse which leads to an action potential, basically. And that leads to the release of chemicals called neurotransmitters. These chemicals diffuse across the synaptic cleft, the area between two neurons, and then bind to receptor sites. So remember, impulse, neurotransmitter, receptor site, behavior. And that's how neural pathways are formed. That's how we get thought patterns and personalities. But the thing is that some neurotransmitters have a very special role. One of these is acetylcholine. Acetylcholine governs most of the things we do all the time. Remembering things, learning new things, moving our muscles. All of these are governed by acetylcholine. And as you can imagine, it plays quite an important role in our bodies. And acetylcholine has receptor sites, as I mentioned. There are two main types, muscarinic, which is present in our motor neurons, and nicotinic. As the name suggests, nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, or NACRs for short, have two main roles. First of all, they accept acetylcholine and then have a behavior as a result, but they also accept nicotine and other external drugs, which is why these chemicals have such a sharp effect on our brain. Our brain is practically designed to handle them. Of course, nicotine has two main ways that it can interact with these NACRs. There's an agonistic way. Agonistic just means that it excites your neurons. So you will have a higher level of neuronal activity. For example, if an agonistic impulse takes place, you will be able to think faster or think more strongly about a topic. However, a few NACRs have antagonistic effects. They dampen neuronal activity, and this leads to something interesting. It's called Nesbitt's paradox. If there are any smokers in the audience today, you may know about this. But if you have a very small dosage, just one cigarette or maybe two, then has a purely excitatory effect. You will feel elated, you will feel more filled with energy, and nicotine also releases adrenaline, which kind of adds to this effect. However, if you have a larger and larger dose, this eventually leads to a more sedatory effect. You will feel more numb and calm due to those antagonistic receptors. But enough about the bio. Why is it so addictive? Well, specifically, in your brain, there are ventral pathways, either somewhere in the center, somewhere down, And what they do is they govern reward links. Reward links essentially just mean that an activity, a behavior, or impulse is connected to a reward. And in the case of your brain, this reward is a release of a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Dopamine governs pleasure in the brain. It governs activities which need to be reinforced and rewarded. When you do something you like, if you have food you like, even if you consume alcohol, that releases dopamine. And as such, nicotine directly impacts these pathways. For example, if you have a high level of nicotine in your brain at any given point of time, it can modulate the level of these reward-linked pathways. And as a result, you will have a high level of elation and pleasure, leading to that reinforcing effect. That's why you keep on coming back for more cigarettes. And of course, the brain can't just let you constantly be elated, because that would hamper neuronal function. So it comes up with a solution, an opposing force. When you have a high level of dopamine in your brain due to whatever reason, then it will start to build up an opposing force to kind of balance that out. But the problem is, what happens if you stop smoking? If you decide to go cold turkey and completely cut out all nicotine from your life, then only that opposing force remains. And that's why you have withdrawal effects. You feel depressed. Your hands might start to shake, because there are physical impacts to this too. It is in your brain after all. And as such, this leads to that withdrawal. That's why you can't just go cold turkey. No scientist will recommend that. Instead, you have to slowly dilute the amount of nicotine which you have present in your daily routine. And how do you do this? Nicotine replacement therapy. That's right, you use nicotine again, but why? Isn't that the problem? Well, honestly, no. Tobacco is the problem. Sure, nicotine's the addictive chemical, but the tar in tobacco and the smoke which is present in it is what's causing those carcinogenic effects. Nicotine doesn't cause cancer, tobacco does. So if you want to reduce the amount of tobacco in your system, you replace it with more benign forms of nicotine, patches, gum, or e-cigarettes or vapes. That's right, e-cigarettes or vaping is the most effective and efficient form of nicotine replacement therapy, which makes sense, right? You're smoking, why not replace it with something which is also kind of smoke, but just without all the nasty tobacco bits? But people who use vapes nowadays aren't doing it to help with their withdrawal symptoms. Instead, they are doing it recreationally. They're treating it as its own form of nicotine injection as a drug. And the demographic which is most sharply targeted by this is Generation Z. That's right, many people in this audience today are the target demographic when it comes to vaping. In fact, in Britain alone, 70% of users of vapes are between 11 and 17 years old. Those are pubescent, prepubescent people. They're not even adults yet, and they are the main market of these tens of thousands of vapes flooding the entire UK system, right? And even in Singapore, this number is just increasing every single day. In 2022 to 2023, there was a 60% jump in the number of people using vapes. This is obviously something we have to stop. It's not like the marketers are doing anything to stop this. The marketers know what they're doing. In fact, they are specifically making sure that the marketing of these vapes, the chemicals which are present within it, the names, flavors, the scents which are associated with them, are specifically made to target your young people. They have names like candy floss. They use Gen Z buzzwords. They are targeting children in the only way that they can do so legally. And so we need to stop it. We need to ensure that vapes don't become as normalized as alcohol does, because we don't know the long-term effects of it. We know how smoking works, like I said, 12,000 years, but we don't know how vapes work. That's more recent, and that's something we need to cut out. But of course, I've been talking about substance abuse, but there is another form of gambling, and that is related to another form of addiction, that is related to habitual addiction, or gambling. Gambling is pretty much any sort of recreational activity which involves placing stakes in the expectation that you will get a larger amount of stakes in return. And the connection between these two has a stochastic process. What is a stochastic process? A stochastic process just means there's luck involved. You roll a dice, you spin a roulette wheel, and as such, this leads to some level of variation or random chance. And specifically, gambling, by connecting an impulse and a reward, forms a psychological concept known as a reinforcement schedule. Let's take the example of a little mouse in a maze. A reinforcement schedule for this mouse would be complete the maze, get some cheese. That's reinforcement. It does the work, it gets a reward. Simple. And this is a fixed ratio reinforcement schedule. Fixed ratio just means each time it does a thing, it gets a reward. It's fixed. It's constant. But this isn't the most efficient way of training the mouse. Instead, you need a variable ratio reinforcement schedule. What does that mean? Well, each time the mouse does a maze, there's a random chance it gets the cheese. The scientist flips a coin, stochastic process. And what happens is now the mouse is no longer doing this just for the reward. It also has anticipation. Will it get the cheese? Will it not? Now it's become a game. How many times will it have to go in that maze until it gets the reward? And that's how gambling works too. Gambling addicts don't just do it for the money they get. Sure, that's how they may have started, but that's not how it's ended. Now they're doing it for the anticipation. Even if they lose all the money they've put, even if they lose the clothes off their back, they are still getting the anticipation of seeing those roulette balls slide by, of seeing the pachinko machine go scrolling through. And that's what hooks them. Some people may think that there is a distinction between skill-based and luck-based gambling. After all, if you're doing blackjack or poker, then surely that's not the same as just watching a roulette wheel, right? Meh. Actually, that also has stochastic elements. Think about it. You don't know what the next card is in blackjack. You don't know what the hand you're dealt is going to be. And as such, there are still random processes at play. You still have that variable ratio reinforcement schedule, and you are still going to get hooked as equally likely as it was for the other guys. But now, I've talked about these big things. I've talked about drugs. I've talked about gambling. How do these use them? Well, specifically, social media companies and video game companies use processes from both of these things, pulling them together to hook in their users. Let's start with video games. Now, video games use stochastic processes. Again, think about it. The number of times that you have to do something in a video game before you receive the reward can vary. If you're playing games with other people, the number of times that you have to kill them or the number of times that you have to do something successfully isn't always going to be the same. But specifically, there's a mechanic which quite insidiously uses this to hook its viewers. And like the slide says, specifically to hook children. And that is gacha, or loot box mechanics. A loot box essentially just means that there is a crate or box or wheel or some sort of container in the game which contains different types of rewards. These rewards could help the player get ahead in the game. These rewards could help the player look slightly nicer in the game. Doesn't always have to be something which truly helps, as long as it's something which the player values. And generally, in this loot box, there'll be different things of different value. The player wants that high-value item. They want to get as far ahead as possible. They want to look as nice as possible with the nicest hat on top of their player character. That's how loot boxes work. But of course, companies don't just do this so their players have fun. I mean, sure, that's great, but companies want money. If you have a free-to-play game, they need to get that money back somehow for development. And that's what these loot boxes was first thought of for. They were formed in the 2000s in response to a pre-existing Japanese mechanic called gachapon, which are just vending machines in the real world, which used to have these little balls. You would buy a ball from a company which you like, and then inside that ball, there would be a toy. But you don't know which toy you'll get. Let's say you really like an anime. You go to the gachapon machine, you get a ball, it's not your favorite character. Either you go okay with it and you walk away, or you keep on putting in more and more money until eventually you get your favorite character. And the people who do that are going to spend lots more money than if they just bought a toy online. That's what those Japanese manufacturers were aiming for, and that's what the video game companies are aiming for too. They know that some people are going to keep on going until they get that money, until they get that reward which they really like within the game. And these people are called whales. Specifically, at the end of the day, not many people are going to spend much money on a video game, right? Maybe $10 to $20 here and there, but these whales spend $5,000 to $10,000 on games which they like just to get that loot which they value. And as such, they offset everybody else. Even if everybody else is not spending much, these guys are making sure that overall, the video game company gets their money back. And that's how they hook these people. They know their audience, they know how to get their money, because that's what companies do. But of course, it's not just those stochastic elements. You might think about think about how you have a cigarette, okay? You don't just absorb nicotine into your body. No. You take out a cigarette, you light it, put it in your mouth, you remove it, you inhale the smoke, then eventually the nicotine gets into your system. There's this whole little ritual you're doing with stimuli, both visual, both auditory, both oral. There's a bunch of stimuli which is going on. And as such, these video game and social media companies know to link stimuli to the reward, because they don't want you to just enjoy content. They want you to enjoy that game. They want you to enjoy that app. when you're scrolling through Instagram Reels and you like a reel, then it will put a little heart shape or put a little sound or something like that. And that ensures that you connect that dopamine release from seeing content you like with those audiovisual cues. Because the audiovisual cues are what keep on bringing you back. Not just the content. You can find content on anything, but they want you to be hooked specifically to that app. Same goes for video games. Sounds, lights, that's what they want you to be hooked on. But let's focus specifically on social media. Everyone knows about the algorithm. A lot of people have talked about it already today, as almost revered by content curators as some sort of mechanic which brings things from the depths and shows it to the common people when they are scrolling through their app. But how does this algorithm work? Well, when you use an app, you keep on going through content, you like things, you scroll past things, and each amount of time which you spend, each amount of engagement which you give some piece of content informs the app about what you like. It informs the app about what things you value, and then it gives you content. Clear enough, seems like a fixed ratio reinforcement schedule, right? You put in something, you get something out. Clear? No. There are stochastic processes at play here as well. It is, again, variable ratio. Because if a company just shows you things you like, you're not going to stay very long, right? You have your fix, you see the things which you want to see cute puppies, you see a few cute puppies, put the app down. Done. They don't get their ad revenue, they don't get the money back. Instead, what they want to do is show you things which you also don't like at all. Also show you things which are completely unrelated to your interests. So either you engage with them saying, I don't like this ugly puppy, or you just keep on scrolling until eventually you find something cute again. But that means that you do have to keep on scrolling. You don't spend 5 minutes on the app, you spend 2 hours on the app because you get caught in this loop of trying to find something which you like. And that's how they hook you. That's how they get their ad revenue back. That's how they ensure that they get the people staying on their app. That's how they use those addictive mechanisms. In fact, here's something which you may not know. When you sleep, you go through rapid eye movement sleep, right? Your eyes move, moves up and down. And when you do that, your brain knows, oh, I should focus up right now, a dream's happening, this is useful. But you know what else happens when you move your eyes down and then up? That's kind of like scrolling. And that's what companies do. When you scroll through an app like this, you're moving your eyes down and up. Your brain's like, oh, something important's happening, I should focus up, and that helps you get hooked. You know what else happens when you move your eyes down and up? That's a pachinko machine. You pull the slots, you see them scrolling up, you're focused. All these little insidious mechanics are present in everything. And that kind of brings me to a point which I have, which is anything can hook you. Don't be scared. Just because you hear, oh, something's addictive, oh, I will never try that. I will never lend my time to something which should be addictive. Not true. Anything can have addictive mechanisms because workouts release endorphins, because doing work gives you rewarded feelings. In that essence, you still have those reward links, and you can still get hooked to things. But that doesn't mean it's all bad. Sure, you should stay focused, because when you do get addicted to something, it's hard to pull out of it. When people go through withdrawal, they need conscious effort. They need to make sure that they're constantly ensuring that they aren't falling back in their old patterns, and they need constant effort. It doesn't take a week. It doesn't take a month. There's a reason that Alcoholics Anonymous gives you chips for 1 year and 5 years. It's a constant process. It keeps on going. And that's why. It's not something easy, and when something isn't easy, we need to support each other. There's no point stigmatizing addiction. There's no point being rude to other people around you or pushing them away because they're addicted to something. Support your friends. Support your loved ones. Make sure that addiction is something which we can get past, even if all these companies don't want you to. Look, at the end of the day, you're swimming through a sea of content all the time. Make sure that you're looking out for all the hooks around you. Thank you.